Ms. Cheryl Chan.
Mr. Speaker, the budget is an important annual process that defines the focus for the country in each fiscal year, outlines the plans to be implemented, and also sets the tone of how the nation's fiscal health may be like in the years ahead. But how many Singaporeans take a strong interest in the budget, or what it is like, and discuss how the budget impacts the future state of our economy? A few days ago, I overheard a conversation between two individuals regarding our budget 2019. So Mr. X asked Mr. Y, have you checked out the budget calculator and see what benefits you get? And Y replied, not yet. I roughly heard some things about it, but seems there's no benefits for me or my family. Such conversation may sound familiar to some. It indicates a lack of interest about the budget, or the only association they have with the budget is a measure of one-off monetary benefits. The underlying message is worrisome, that the budget is nothing more than a bag of benefits that serves some people in one year or the other. As we chart our way forward and work towards an inclusive society, this is an increasingly pertinent topic to address. I believe it is time for us to define who we are, what we can do as one country, and what we hope the future Singapore to be. While some issues can be addressed with short-term fixes, the future state of the country requires longer-term strategies. And this big picture, the end state, must be defined and built together with the citizens and the government. We need participants, not bystanders in the process. Singapore has a growing aging population, the external environment is more dynamic and disruptive, and future scenarios are more unpredictable. These are all facts and norms of the new age. For Singapore to rise above the challenges and ensure every citizen has a place in this country, we should take a hard look at what it takes to be inclusive. How can we be inclusive unless it is consciously built into our policies, ingrained as a culture, and as individuals, we think and walk them like a way of life? To me, building social capital and civic participation is key. In this process, the concept of sharing is fundamental. Sharing of wealth, sharing of people, and available resources. Let's begin by looking at what areas we need to improve to achieve a more equitable distribution of resources. Looking at where Singapore is, one can say that Singapore should be considered having done well, as our system is built on principles of meritocracy, has a fair and progressive tax system, and the redistribution of wealth has a focus on social outcomes. But over the last decade, there are evidences that indicates the increase in wealth inequality has become greater than income inequality. Those with the wealth are not only on a better footing to accumulate more, they have even better access to resources that helps preserve their wealth. To reduce the wealth inequality gap in Singapore, we tax through personal income, property and consumption. This way, the top earners and those with more assets contribute. To further encourage those who have more to give, the tax-deductible donation scheme was implemented. I believe many donate as they believe in the causes and not because of the tax deductibles. But it is also true that since the estate duty was scrapped in 2008, the number of charitable foundations and trust funds set up has since increased threefold. Compared globally, Singapore has a low personal income tax rate. But with a shrinking and aging workforce, it is impractical to consider further taxes on income. After all, the ability of an average income worker to build wealth is dependent on sheer labor. Also, the consumption tax in one way or the other does impact the lower income group to meet their basic living expenses. The GST and transport vouchers, silver support scheme and other subsidies is given to the lower income group do help to defray some of the costs. But overall, consumption taxes indirectly do raise the general cost of living. In order to maintain fiscal prudence, we need new revenue sources to sustain the many programs that may have a long tail in the years ahead. While we look ahead and review the current tax system in entirety, should we consider the possibility of a net wealth tax and inheritance tax for the ultra-high net worth individuals who make up 1 to 2% of our society? In the spirit of giving and sharing, will the ultra-high net worth individuals be willing to share more of their wealth to uplift the vulnerable and less privileged communities? Another case in point is the wages of the low-income workers. Many of these workers are hired in domestically focused industry like the cleaning industry, security and landscaping. I've come across my own residents in these sectors and they work very long hours to ensure the income can meet the family's expenses. For these individuals, we cannot expect they would have the luxury of time to upkeep and have upgrading of their skills, or even to further define their career path on the long run. Over time, they are the ones who are disadvantaged by us, the consumers of their services. While the current progressive wage model and the workfare income supplementary scheme are designed to help raise their wages, the question still remains if this is sufficient in today's context to support and meet the basic needs of the low-income worker and their family. The government has implemented multiple targeted schemes in larger quantums, like the Comcare, GST rebate, transport vouchers, education funds, etc., to continue assisting this low-income group. There are also donations of cash in kind from the public and the voluntary welfare organizations to them. Clearly, all donations will help them in one way or the other, but are these safety nets the answer to their basic needs? I feel that to effectively make a difference that impacts and uplift the lower percentile group, in particular those younger families, giving them access to resources, especially a decent living wage, so that each worker at the end of the month would have more to spare, is actually more critical. Not having time only to live hand to mouth will also allow them to have some quality time with their children or grandchildren that can foster the growth of the next generation and instill family bonding that many average family enjoys. This brings us to the crux of the issue. How much more are consumers and employers willing to pay them to meet the living wage? We cannot continue this path of racing to the last dollar for the value of contracts, asking for more productivity from these workers without paying for tools or environment that aid their productivity improvement. Assigning more tasks to them when we can do some on our own, something even as simple as clearing our own plates and trays after a meal. The employers too have a fair share to play in this as they balance their profits, reinvest in the workers, and give the workers a decent wage to begin with. It is not how large or small the action is, but what we are willing to do and to what extent to effect the change. This comes back to the basic question of sharing. The top and middle tiers of the economy, whilst they have more opportunities and pathway to elevate, they can certainly do more for the lower income group, starting with a willingness to pay more for their services. Our mindset and actions around this issue ultimately reflect the value of this country and its people. Another area that I wish to highlight is the need for knowledge transfer between the intergenerations and within the working class. Knowledge sharing is a very important resource in any organization. When we exchange information, skills, and expertise, it not only creates awareness of expectations, it also serves to update the workforce of changes within the workplace and consequently trains the people. Any organization, and a country for that matter, which has a culture of sharing will achieve better results of faster response time, better coordination and diversity in solutions to their problems. In the next 2 decades, we will see the retirement of a large cohort of baby boomers, and the millennials will eventually make up most of the workforce. This drain of expertise and knowledge will have its repercussions if there are no early channels for intergeneration or inter-workforce transfer. I do not doubt that millennials are learning and will develop their different new skill sets to meet the future workplace demands. But in all businesses, there are some fundamentals in people and business management that will always be relevant across time. These are the key aspects of operating a business beyond data analytics, automation, and the technology app. For young startups and SMEs to scale up or internationalize, they require some of this knowledge and stepping stones that can reduce their learning curve. Consultation and guidance from the working group in their 40s and to 50s today will be useful for these companies. The same applies for employers. They must be willing to conduct in-house development training for their workers and bridge the generational gap and workplace knowledge through job rotations and have a healthy mix in the retention of seniors. As we put focus on structural aspects of the industry transformation maps, let us not forget the need to step up on our mentorship guidance and the cross-industry functional knowledge exchange. Mr. Speaker, the conversation about inequality gap, who are the intended beneficiaries and how much or whom should give, is not a talk that will end. Countries with longer history than Singapore are facing the same issue. But all this will only continue to be chatters unless we as a country, as the people of this little red dot, begin to acknowledge that we must all play a part and take actions in our daily lives to make Singapore an inclusive one, a country. If we cannot convince ourselves to demonstrate the intrinsic values of this country, our future debates, budget debates and conversation with the public will be nothing more than package subsidies, net investment return contributions, and incremental shifts in our economy and trade. Not that these are unimportant, but they will not move the needle nor set the long-term direction of our country. And without building our social capital now, defining the values and roles of this country with active civic participation, each budget will only fall on years of the citizens like a lecture in class, an endless debate of whose rightful duty it is to care for the aging population and the future generations. And I support the motion.